afternoon, and I'm delighted to be here. And yes, I'm from the University of Southern California. Any Trojans in the audience? Ooh. Ooh. That means you went to USC, for those who grew up on the West Coast. USC's Institute of Communication Technology is an extraordinary institution that studies the global mobile environment. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. This is a bit different from everything else you've heard. What we'll talk about is making sense of the 6 billion. So you've all heard of the mobile revolution. And there's been a lot of talk today about different ways of measuring mobile usage, advertising, engagement. But let's start thinking how big this can be. And the answer is very big. There's 6 billion cell phones in the world today. About half of them are in Europe, Americas, and more developed economies, like the one we sit in right now. But the other half are in India, China, and other areas that are growing rapidly. And there will soon be a doubling of those secondary markets, with eventually 10 billion cell phones in the world in 2016. So what does this mean? It means not only is this the most widely proliferated electronic device, it is the most widely proliferated anything. More widely distributed than water, certainly than landlines, than television, I'm sorry to tell people. 87% of the world's population uses a cell phone, and that percentage is growing. Now, why is this important? Why do we care about emerging economies? The reason is because that is where most of the world's GDP will come from, and certainly the vast majority of GDP growth in the next 10 or 15 years. So you've got to be thinking about this as you work with your clients on their media plans, because the developing world will drive growth in mobile. Our global mobile study is a consortium of 15 countries. We work with universities, we work with government associations, and we also do a lot of the work ourselves. This includes a number of European countries, Australia, we're on 5 continents, and most particularly, we're doing research in China, India, and Egypt. And those are the 3 countries I'm going to focus on because they're both gigantic, and they're changing very rapidly, and they're changing the world of mobile. We track usage in mobile data services, and we've done this for 8 years. We identify major drivers in mobile usage, not just entertainment, but also communication, socializing, mobile payments, etc. And we look at what constrains mobile growth. Our consortium meets every year. We actually meet in Europe in about 2 weeks. We aim for a standardized sample in all 15 countries. We have a representative sample in each market, and the data is shared globally amongst the consortium, but it is analyzed at USC CTM. Our findings are published in academic and industry journals, and if you are interested, we publish freely and are happy to share. And I'll put up my email at the end of this talk. Now, to talk about different usage in different countries, we all know that in the US, there's email, there's SMS. Obviously, if you're a teenager, you only use SMS, you never use email. We all know this. Portugal is an example of a European country where you've got about the same complement alongside different businesses like banking, which is more widely proliferated in Europe than it is here. But when you start looking at Taiwan and Japan, developed Asian economies, you see a very different complement of items among the top 6. And China, which is quite an idiosyncratic market with the world's largest mobile carrier, China Mobile, number 1 is MMS. What does that mean? People are taking photos and sending them to their friends. And it also means that they have subscription MMS services that are extremely lucrative. There's also banking and news and microblogs, interestingly, for what we think of as a closed society. What's important for you to know is that the mobile internet is the sole or primary access for most people in the territories I'm talking about. In Egypt, 70% of the people who receive internet access do so over a cell phone. Now that's a kind of astonishing thought when you imagine what's going on. India, similarly, and African and other Asian countries are driving quickly. I wrote an editorial about smartphone usage in the US, and I think most of you know that for 25% of the people in this country, they may get their primary access to internet on a smartphone. And that's being fueled by smaller carriers like Cricket, like Metro PCS, that are doing a huge business in smartphones. Cricket just launched its first unlocked iPhone, and this will revolutionize the market. Social networking is also transforming the mobile landscape. And what's important for you to know is that social networking is not just fun. We think of it in the US as Facebook dominated because it is so here. But in Russia, China, and Egypt, there are a wide variety of different social networking operations. For example, Russia's seen over 25% growth in social networking in the last year. That's because Facebook and Twitter are primary sources of information around politics that they're not seeing on television. In Egypt, there's really a split where Facebook organizes activists and Twitter is the expression of news, getting the word out. When you look at this graph, if you look over around the green circle, you see the United States, which is the most developed country economically and the most developed in terms of social networking. But let's look down the curve here to those with a lower GDP and less social networking, to China, Turkey, Russia, Egypt. You still see quite a lot of use, nearly 30% in most of those economies. And don't forget giant countries like India, with 1 billion people, and Indonesia, the world's 4th largest country with 240 million people. I was in Indonesia last year, and I have to say, my guide had better Facebook site than we did, better cell service, and about half the people in Indonesia have excellent cell service, often with smartphones, and they're using social networking on their cell phones. In China, news and social are what drive data usage. People are also very interested in having privacy at work when they want to communicate an idea. And they also use it for work socializing. That's a very important facet of social networking to them. SMS dominates. Twitter is important. And Twitter, interestingly, again, is used at home, at work, and on the go. I would say that's pretty different from the usage that you see here. In China, you've got a lot of diversity in social networks. You'll notice that Facebook is not on that graph. And if you think about China's 1.3 billion inhabitants, it's interesting that the largest social network has 200 million. So you've got half a dozen very diverse social networks, some of which are more attuned to urban, hip, better educated city dwellers, and some of which reach young, rural, often men, who have very different orientation. So what's the role of social networking for development, for developing countries? First of all, in business, social networks are used to do pricing, to discuss strategy between different groups. It's an information transmittal device that isn't just social. It's how people do business. In health, which we haven't even talked about, in the developing world, mobile will be the primary access many people have to medical care. They get messages to their caregiver. They're actually EMS technicians who don't have an ambulance. They have a cell phone. They take a photo, they send in for a diagnosis, and they treat dispensing pharmaceuticals. So it's an extraordinarily different way of doing business and something for you to think about as you plan globally. Politics, we've already talked about, and we've all seen that with Arab Spring and other uprisings. And in social, again, very diverse social connections at home and at work with different purposes. Mobile payments is revolutionizing not just Africa, but also India. In India, a cell phone is now considered a utility device. It's useful to 75% of the users, and you see ease of use, information, and communication are the most important. But it's very different from the way we use it here. Because the phones are low-tech, SMS is the primary technology, and because a lot of people are illiterate, voice is ubiquitous. I actually saw a dating app in India that was great, where you could dial up, well, it was India, so it wasn't a blonde and a brunette, but basically you could have the girl of your choice, the Match.com, but all done via voice. So the applications are very different, and the way they're used are different. Rural is terribly important because what's happening is the infrastructure is just not being built out in rural India. The cities are very sophisticated, but most people live in the countryside. So finance updates are key, microfinancing help. They're more important to rural people. Again, a reversal of the behavior you might see here. Banking services, as you can see on this graph, where 70% of the population is, there are no mobile banks. There are no banks. So banks will be mobile. Instead of having actual locales, new types of businesses are springing up, reaching this opportunity, which is enormous. So the banks that reach hundreds of millions of people in India will be on their cell phones. And that's an opportunity for you, because they may not be running ads, but this is how they live their daily lives. There's a wide variety of basic delivery methods in terms of mobile banking worldwide, although the financial mechanisms differ, and you've got very different systems. Actually, the most successful mobile banking in the world is in Kenya. There's a company called M-Pesa, which is spread across Africa, and it's used not only for remittances and transmission of funds, but people use it to get their paychecks. They go in, they've got their cell phone, they get a paycheck, and then they go to the store and buy something. So that's an extraordinarily different way of doing business for you to think about. So again, what's the mobile future? 10 billion. That's a lot of cell phones, and a lot of cell phones that are used differently to the way that we're looking at and that we're studying here. Some key trends that would be important for you are, again, mobile web, primary access. So that's critically important. And very simple means of access can be very powerful. Social mobile networking is not just fun. It's for work and it's for business. Health will be a primary driver of mobile activity, and payments will enable most transactions. The priorities are different. In the very small amount of research that's being done on media usage in these markets, people are saying that they actually spend more of their media time on mobile than TV. Of course, that may be because they don't have a TV. So what are some thoughts as the marketplace develops? Mobile video phones, about half the phones in the world are video enabled. So as that passes 50%, you've got quite an opportunity to deliver entertainment and other content and messages via video. Mobile ads will emerge as the ecosystem develops. 66% of mobile users globally are quite comfortable with mobile advertising on a cell phone as much as on a television. So it's very different from the resistance that Google talked about this morning in one of the smaller sessions. 42% of respondents have said that ads introduce them to something new. In some ways, you've got a very receptive audience. There's no clutter in the lives of these people who are about to buy their first cell phone. Future trends that may be important for you to think about are, it is the largest mass medium the world has ever known, 6 billion to 10 billion. Simplicity will rule, however, as the ecosystems develop. We've seen that in mobile advertising in the US. It hasn't developed quite as quickly as some early people thought because it's complex to deliver, and you've got a pretty small screen. Basic technology will rule in the emerging economies, as will innovative, creative business models that we can't even imagine in the West. You've got to use the medium, reach people while they're making payments, while they're doing social networking, connecting for social and for business purposes. I think what's most important about the global mobile explosion and what's most powerful is that it's not just life enhancing, it's life enabling. So thank you. And again, I'm happy to share these slides and this presentation to anyone who's interested, and I'll be happy to take questions. Thanks. Boy, you can really tell it's afternoon. In the back here, with the blue shirt.
This was a great presentation, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the funding sources that fund some of the work that you do with these consortiums worldwide? I think that partnering would be really interesting to understand.
Sure. USCCTM is backed by 25 corporate sponsors, including AT&T, Verizon, also media companies like Ogilvy, Fox, Disney, as well as infrastructure companies like Cisco and Alcatel. So we receive corporate funding, and then we also get government grants to work particularly in developed economies. Thanks very much.